Today, we're jumping into a really fascinating and, honestly, powerful question that sits right at the heart of Hindu mythology. How can one of its most beloved figures, a literal symbol of devotion, also be this incredible force of cosmic destruction? I mean, let's just dive right into that. Hanuman is celebrated for his loyalty, his absolute selfless service. So this idea that his anger could be powerful enough to destroy the world, it feels like a total contradiction, right? How do you even begin to reconcile those two images of the same being? All right, here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll break it down into 5 key parts. We'll start by digging into that paradox. Then we'll establish who Hanuman really is at his core. After that, we'll look at what actually triggers his legendary fury, walk through a famous case study, and then finally, we'll get to the real meaning behind all this destruction. Okay, first things first. We really need to frame this central conflict we're exploring. It's all about getting our heads around the two powerful, seemingly opposite sides of the single divine being. And you can see it laid out so clearly here. On one side, you have the devotee, the humble servant, a symbol of peace, defined by this incredible, unwavering loyalty. But then you flip the coin and you've got the warrior, a being of just fearsome power, an instrument of divine justice who can unleash this absolutely unstoppable wrath. So how did these two things exist in one person? Right, so before we can even really talk about his fury, we have to understand his foundation. Who is Hanuman really at his absolute core, before we even get to the anger part? At his heart, fundamentally, Hanuman is the embodiment of bhakti. That's pure, unshakable devotion. He's a symbol of selfless service, not of power for its own sake. All of his immense strength and courage, it's always in service of protecting dharma, which is that cosmic law of righteousness and order. And this quote, wow, it just says it all, doesn't it? He doesn't see his power as his own. It's not about him. It's a divine tool, a gift that flows directly from his devotion to a cause that is so much bigger than himself. It turns out his humility is actually the source of his strength, not something that contradicts it. Okay, so if his entire nature is built on devotion and service, what in the world could provoke a being like that to the point of destructive rage? Well, the triggers are very specific, and importantly, they aren't personal. And this is where things get really fascinating. There's a huge difference between the kind of selfish anger you or I might feel, something that comes from our ego or desires, and this divine fury or krodh that Hanuman shows. His anger doesn't come from a personal insult. It is a righteous anger that only sparks to life when it's facing a grave injustice, and its only goal is to restore balance. It's a corrective, purifying force, not a chaotic one. Yeah, and this isn't some sudden, hot-headed outburst. There's a process, a kind of moral checklist. First, a really serious act of unrighteousness, or adharma, has to happen. Then, a warning is given. An opportunity for the person to change course is put on the table. And it's only when that warning is arrogantly ignored that this divine fury is finally unleashed as the last resort for justice. Which brings us perfectly to the most famous, most vivid, and frankly most epic example of this in action, taken straight from the Ramayana. So just follow the sequence here. He arrives totally peacefully. His mission is diplomatic. He even allows himself to be captured just so he can deliver a message to the demon king Ravana. But when that message of righteousness is met with a demeaning, arrogant act of violence, setting his tail on fire, that's when everything changes. That insult wasn't just against him. It was an insult against the very principle of dharma that he represented. I mean, think about that for a second. The sheer scale of this is just staggering. One being, using the very fire meant to humiliate him, goes on to humble an entire city built on arrogance and evil. This wasn't just petty revenge. It was a powerful, unforgettable demonstration that when you attack dharma, there are massive consequences. So let's bring it all back home. We started with this big question about Hanuman's fury destroying the world, but what world are we actually talking about here?
And here is the key concept you absolutely have to understand. Dharmic destruction. The goal is not to annihilate existence. It's not about just blowing things up. It is a surgical act designed to dismantle a system of evil, to destroy a worldview of arrogance and injustice that threatens the cosmic balance of everything.
So this is it. This is the core answer. The world, in our question, is a metaphor. Hanuman doesn't destroy the planet, not even close. He destroys the world of Ravana, a world built on kidnapping, on ego, and on a stubborn refusal to listen to reason. He burns down a corrupt system, not the physical globe. Okay, so what's the big takeaway here? Why does any of this matter? Well, for one, it totally reframes anger, showing it not just as chaos, but as a potential tool for justice. It also highlights that some forms of destruction can actually be a form of purification, a necessary clearing of the ground. And maybe most importantly, it shows us that true devotion is not a passive thing. It is an active, powerful, and courageous force for good in the universe. And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought to chew on. Something that connects this ancient story right to our own lives today. To create a more just world, is it sometimes necessary to first dismantle the old, corrupt systems that are already in place? It's a timeless question about the very nature of change, justice, and renewal.